Music Not Diving is brought to you by Acid Nation. What is Acid Nation? Well, it is a direct-to-consumer platform, previously known as AC55ID.com. It is the fastest growing electronic music marketplace. So if you're looking to sell direct to your fans as a label or an artist, this is a great solution for you. And if you're a music fan yourself, looking to support your favorite labels or favorite artists, well, this is a great place for you to be spending your time and your money. What is the difference between Acid Nation and other D2C platforms? Well, one big one is that they have their own pressing plant and they can fulfill vinyl orders direct from fans and ship them back to fans. Pretty amazing, right? Because they have their own fulfillment service to go with the pressing plant. They can do all of that stuff for you. You don't have to lift a finger, in fact, to do any of it. And what's more, they have free storage for all of your stock, all of your vinyl, all of your merch, all that kind of stuff. They deal with it all and they don't charge you anything to keep it around either. Pretty great, right? Another great thing is streaming. Most DC platforms don't pay for streaming, but Acid Nation pays 1 cent per stream. Really great and a kind of mythical thing in the industry. Amazing that they're doing it on acidnation.com. They're also supporting Music Not Diving, of course. Another great feather in their cap, I guess. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. Head over to acidnation.com to check them out.
Funnily enough, Tresor was the first club I went to when I first moved to Berlin. 10, 13 years later, I'm now doing the bookings. So, and I think that speaks to the business techno kind of cachet of what has been happening to the industry, and you know, just to separate it, it's not just techno that is under this umbrella of an expression. It's a wider part of the slickness of the electronic music, underground electronic music industry that is now catching up to more like commercials, like large scale, but using their models to, you know, make the underground, you know, profitable. And that goes against, it's counterintuitive in a way to the ethos of what underground music is meant for.
This is Music Not Diving with Scuba.
Welcome to the show. I'm Scuba. This is Music Not Diving. Okay, I'm going to do something now which I never do, which is plug a release of mine. I had something out last Friday on Sasha's label and Last Night on Earth. It's called Archives Meteors, which means there's 2 tracks, one called Archives, one called Meteors. And it is, I think, some of the better deep house stuff that I've done ever, really. So link in the show notes, go check it out and let me know in the comments if you like it. So the show this week, on with the show, we have none other than Paul Ćinske. Who is Paul Ćinske? Well, Tresor, you may be aware of, maybe the most important club in the history of techno. It's a big statement, but I'm pretty sure I can get behind that in a serious kind of a way. Paul Ćinske is the booker there. He is responsible for everything that goes on at the club musically. He books it all. He kind of provides creative direction. In fact, what he exactly does, we get into in detail in this conversation. But yeah, just what a powerful man, actually, in Berlin clubbing, and certainly a powerful man in the venue itself. So this is a great one. We talk about all kinds of things. Berlin, what's going on now, the venue specifically, a bit about the history of a label too. And this is just an interesting conversation, really, that you're going to like. So let's get into it, shall we? This is a phono, not in the studio, but that's okay. Let's check out my conversation with Tresor's Paul Ćinske.
Brought to you by acidnation.com.
Paul Ćinske, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, good. Thanks for coming on. So we are going to be talking about I think the Berlin club scene, but also specifically Tresor, because you are the booker at Tresor.
Sure. Yeah, so that's, I kind of stumbled upon the role. Funnily enough, Tresor was the first club I went to when I first moved to Berlin. It was literally in the first 2 weeks of moving over. I didn't know I was going to stay. It's a very classic, cliched Berlin story. Come for a year, end up staying. And I went to Tresor New Faces on a Wednesday. And yeah, 10, 13 years later, I'm now doing the bookings. So initially I started off at Stadtbad, working in music, both in the gastro scene, and then moved back over when I realized I could actually work behind the scenes. They were really happy to have me help with logistics. They were just starting to expand, doing the Friday programming. I think at the time Stadtbad was only doing Fridays, maybe once a month, perhaps. So it was the time for them to expand, and I took a punt, moved all my stuff, got a visa, and then 3 months later, Stadtbad closed. So
Okay. So you're from Australia originally, right?
Correct. Yeah, grew up in Brisbane, lived in Melbourne for about 5 years, working in gastronomy, hospitality, and was moonlighting on the side in clubs. So got my start doing artist care, working for promoters, booking shows. I'm not sure if you remember Future Music.
I do.
Back in the day, like they had like a subsidiary kind of Saturday night club called After Dark Social Club, and 100% rip off of Paris Social Club at the time. But it worked. It was a really fun time. We were there doing a lot of hosting roles, a lot of pre-production stuff. So that was kind of cutting my teeth in the industry, really, just learning how an event or how a club night was set up. And then, basically decided to move over to Berlin for a holiday and started working in it full time. And that was quite a sharp left turn in my career trajectory. But really, really appreciative and grateful to be on that.
Yeah. Future Music was that festival, right?
Correct. They had Future Music and, from my understanding, Stereosonic as well.
Yeah, right. That's the one I played. Yeah, I don't think I ever played Future, but I definitely played Stereosonic at least 1 year. That was it was a big thing, wasn't it? And it's been kind of superseded now by various other. Well, actually, the Untitled group. We've had one of the guys from there on the podcast, actually. And they've got a sort of suite of festivals, haven't they now, which has really kind of taken over in Australia, right?
It's an interesting one because, unfortunately, I don't go back as often as I would like to. So the scene there is quite foreign to me in terms of ears to the ground, grassroots growth and understanding of what's happening there. But from all the friends that come over summer and stay here and still keep connected to back home, the weekend Duff festival culture is really strong, large in part to festivals like Innovanica that champion that format for 10 or so years, and then of course the much larger kind of, for lack of a better word, commercial music festivals, but they're just bigger in that sense. So the Stereosonics, the Parklifes, and all of that. But I would say the festival scene is very healthy, and the club scene, it's difficult to say. I do know that a lot of my friends who were in clubs have moved into the listening bar, wine bar transitional phase, which we still want to play music, still want to enjoy going out, but want to have a really nice bottle of wine and maybe avoid that brutal hangover that now starts not getting any easier as we get older. So I think that's kind of how Melbourne is at the moment.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. So before we get into Tresor and your specific job, I guess, let's talk about Berlin and the Berlin club scene, generally speaking. It's good to have an insider on the show to talk about this, because a lot of received wisdom gets espoused on this show. So tell me what it's like at the moment, generally speaking, for Berlin clubs.
I mean, again, it's my perspective could be completely different. It's obviously subjective in terms of how my experience and relationship with Berlin's clubbing landscape has been and still is. Definitely, I've been there since 2013. So I've seen a lot of obviously the genres and the actual culture of the music that's being played, the venues themselves. Basically, I think right now it's in a much healthier place than it was in 2022 post-pandemic. I know that there's a lot of talks about closures and a lot of talks about uncertainty with places like Renata and Watergate closing down. I like to think this is just a part of a slightly larger life cycle, that we're just going through the uncertainty period right now, and then it calms down and there's new venues that will open and have opened. And of course, it's cause for concern when Berlin as a city is going through its own teething stage of what it wants to be. I mean, I like the idea that it's a city that's 35 years old or 36 years old, depending on where you want to plant the flag and when the wall fell down and the reunification of the city. So it is going through another massive change, and whether it's in the sense of the greater construction of the city and trying to accommodate for a bigger influx of people moving there for various industries. And that, of course, is going to have some collateral damage. And at the moment, we're seeing higher rent raises. We're seeing, I would argue, definitely for better, much stricter safety protocols enforced for buildings in terms of like having event spaces, whether it's fire safety, whether it's, having guardrails because it's next to the canal or the spree, and making sure people are safe and not falling in when they're partying. There's various degrees of, okay, we should be making these changes for the better. But then, of course, when an iconic institution like Watergate says that they can't afford to open anymore, that's just in general cause for concern and a cause for a greater discussion about where the city is heading.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting that you mentioned the changing musical environment. Talk a bit about that, please. Like how has it changed since you first turned up? What were your first impressions of it musically? I mean, Berlin's obviously got the reputation of being a very much a sort of clicky techno kind of a place, but I think you're going to say it's wider than that now. But yeah, talk about that a bit.
Definitely. I mean, I wish it had the density of a city like London in terms of supporting the various subcultures and genres that you can afford in a city like that. It certainly still has its pockets. They're just not as talked about and obviously not as flourishing with their ever looming dominant quote unquote business techno and hard techno that is prevalent. I don't think that's just a Berlin only problem, or no, it's not even a problem. It's just a flux of the industry, and
it's just music that's bad, that's popular. Do you know what I mean?
And yeah, I think what's changed in 13 years, I think it's more of an attitude to how the clubbing is and how it's presented itself. I think the industry has gotten wiser and slicker in how to present these events, whether you're a grassroots event. Like my background in bookings has come from OM. So it's the smaller sister venue next to Tresor. It's 250 capacity. That created a beautiful DIY grassroots scene of various genres. And I was always, talking with promoters that are doing a very obscure noise night, or they're doing a very obscure bass night and experimental bass, not just like, what would be classified as bass music now. And I think those scenes are still there. It's just right now it's difficult for them to kind of get a foothold in the conversation compared to pre-pandemic standards. I think there's venues like 90 Mil that are really supporting the intersection between performance art and music and experimental music. I think that's probably a big change that I've noticed in the past 5 years compared to before, is that the grassroots underground scene are really pushing the boundaries on what a party or what an experience and a clubbing experience can be. And there's a lot more blurring the lines of just a 4/4 club. No, is it an art space? Is it an exhibition? No, there might be a performance in the middle of a club night. They're really innovating in the very basic format, which is going to a club. And I think that's probably the biggest significant change. That's more obvious rather than, if I say that there's no noise scene, I'm sure that will be a whole bunch of people messaging me saying, "What are you talking about? You're just not going to them." And I know that's true. But from the observation of a general clubbing landscape, there's definitely a lot more emphasis on integrating a lot more different aspects of art into the club.
So to what extent would you say that it's still a techno city in the kind of stereotypical kind of a sense?
Most definitely. I think it's just because my lens of the landscape is definitely through more of the experimental and the performance scene, because that's also like, as a curator that's outside of Tresor, that's also what I work on. So I have I focus on Tresor as a 9 to 5, and I think that's still the dominant market and the dominant conversation in clubbing, straight clubbing. It's nice to see house is making a comeback, if you can call it that, but into the sense of looking at over a scale of say 5 or more years, you will have these fluxes of new DJs coming through and seeing what they're wanting to influence or what they're wanting to protest against. And if they see everyone playing this, they'll maybe play something else. And in this case, house wasn't played for a period of time, from 2022 to 24, maybe. And now we're seeing all the DJs that were kind of in 2022 practicing house and crafting their skill and building up their collections of their own interpretations of the classic genre, now are coming into, okay, I've been DJing for 5 or 6 years, and they bring people down. They're established artists, they're experienced, they understand the club. That is definitely helping nourish another genre, but techno is still 100% the dominant, and by techno, I all its iterations of Detroit, its classic Berghain sound or the Berlin sound, the more industrial stuff, all those facets that in that category definitely still dominate.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things we've talked about a fair bit in recent months on the show has been, the relative decline of small venues across the world, actually. It gets talked about in terms of the UK scene on the show probably the most, but I think this is true in basically every major city, certainly in the Western world anyway. And there are a few sort of wrinkles and a few associated issues with that we've kind of discussed that may or may not be important. What are your observations about, with regards to that broad phenomenon, not just in Berlin, and to what extent is it a thing in Berlin? To what extent have you observed it in your, wider activities? Like, what do you think about this thing generally?
Definitely. It is a very crucial. It plays a very crucial role in supporting the local scene. It doesn't matter which city it is, and if there's no, we're so used to having the end results of a career or a craft projected in front of you, whether it be, Premier League football or the Boiler Room set or something like that. Everyone sees the standard that crafting 10 to 20, 30 years can lead you towards, but there's no insights on how you get there outside of the bedroom. And small venues are the way for people to experiment to 30 people, to put on these things. So yeah, regardless of what your craft is, these small venues are extremely important. And to have, I think I did see that statistic recently from The Guardian talking about London's small venues. I think it was from like 1,400 small venues down to 700 or something like that in the past 12 years. And even in Berlin, I would say it extends to things like record stores and boutique shops, places where subcultures grow, bubble up, networking, and people feel comfortable exchanging ideas. If those places are removed, then we won't see these effects now outside of a dramatic headline, but we will see those effects trickle down. Maybe there's a stagnation in a particular subculture.
Okay, you've watched about 15 minutes of this episode, so well done for sticking around this long. I'm just going to take this opportunity to tell you about the ways you can support the show. So you should already have liked this video and subscribed to the channel, obviously. If you haven't done that, please do it. You could also subscribe to our Patreon, patreon.com/ScubaOfficial. There are 2 reasonably priced tiers there, both of which get you my bonus podcast that I do every 2 weeks. You could also, or alternatively, bonus a one-off donation over at scubaofficial.io/support. If you don't want to do any of those things, completely understand, but please do like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll let you get back to the episode. Thanks.
I do, however, on a positive note, feel that we are very resourceful and very creative when we get put constraints in front of us, and whether it's the illegal raves or whether it's the pop-ups that happen legitimately, people do find ways around the much larger constraints that, say, a government or, say, property or investment puts on the subcultures. So it's difficult, and it constantly feels like the oppressive nature of what we're doing is being tested. But yeah, I think I'm more optimistic than maybe the headlines leave on to what's going to happen. I think people are very resourceful.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I always think that there's a sort of supply and demand sides to this. There are supply and demand sides to this, and often really the supply side is what gets talked about the most, which is to say that, like you said, the pressures on venues, the costs, associated with running a night, a venue, inflation, cost of living, all the rest of it. The other side of it, I think, which I detect certainly in UK, is that there's just less of a demand for these kinds of experiences. And this is associated with the rise of festivals, the relative decline of, anecdotally, the relative decline of hedonism amongst, a younger generation of people, some of which may be accurate, some of which may be slightly overplayed in some cases. Do you detect that? I mean, Berlin is not, I think, comparable to many other places in terms of just the amount of people who go there to have a good time and actually move there, at least partly to have a good time. I mean, maybe that informed your move there. It was a part of me moving there. What do you think about that? I mean, do you think there is a significant shift in what people want? Even people who are into techno, for example. Is there a shift in what people want? Has raving in a dark room inherently become less attractive, do you think, to a certain generation of people?
It's such an interesting question and thought experiment to run. And I know that Sean Ronaldo's talked about this quite often in terms of the aging life of the electronic music scene or the clubbing scene, and how that's affected and the, I wouldn't say the lack of innovation, but basically the flattening out of the culture. Does it make it appealing anymore in that sense? It was like I said, hedonistic in a particular point in time, and now it's turned into a novelty, or it's just hyper normalized in that sense. The fact that clubbing is a part of it's not taboo as much as it used to be, and it's come a part of this day-to-day thing. As that main bulk of the demographic has gotten a little bit older, they're still going out, not as regularly. But for the younger generation, maybe it's obviously a multitude of reasons why they see what we're doing, and they're obviously many times have been documented that they're more concerned about their health, they're more concerned about partying, consuming alcohol. All those things do play a factor. In Berlin, it's very difficult to say because there's a lot of events going on, a lot of club nights, a lot of people going out in general. Whether people are traveling for that is a different story, but the city itself seems, on the surface, when you look at the sheer volume of events that are going on, there is no shortage of people who want to go out or want to put on an event. Maybe that's something a bit different. Maybe there's a lot more people that just think that they can do it themselves. There's maybe not as much demand, but when people, Berlin still is a very low barrier of entry when they want to put on something. There's not as much. If you want to do a pop up, you can do a pop up, and if you want to put on a hire out a space, you can, and it's not exorbitant costs in comparison to, say, like a London or, say, Australia or America. So I think that's why it's still a little bit, it looks like quite healthy. But yeah, it's interesting to see if the demand is there, but maybe it's also just we're in the industry itself, or the culture itself is in this state of, comfortability, where it's now a part of the furniture. And maybe people don't appreciate it as much as our generation or anyone before did, or they just take it for granted in that sense. And it's going to be there on the weekend. It's just a part, and maybe that doesn't. Maybe that just plays into it all.
is your sense that the average age of people going to clubs in Berlin has risen since you've been living there?
It's different. I mean, one of the interesting things that I found when I first moved here was that there was no stigma behind older ravers. And by older, when I was 23, older was in their 30s because
yeah.
and that rubs the salt in the wounds a little bit now thinking about it. But but that's also because I'm coming from Australia, where you clubbed until you finished your uni degree. And
that's very much the UK mentality too. It's the kind of, I suppose, Anglo-Saxon mentality, isn't it, to some extent? And very much that's my perception of the UK. And the reason I asked the question is that my perception of Berlin clubs was always that it was older, like you were, I suppose, saying there. And I suppose, to some extent, I've just accepted that as true. And then the assumption is maybe that it's got older. But yeah, sorry, go on.
No, but I think it has. It's also just difficult to gauge without looking at the data. Tresor is definitely a mature clubbing crowd. We have new faces on Wednesdays, and that's actually a completely separate crowd. We don't have that much cross-pollination between guests who go on Wednesdays to guests who join us on Fridays and Saturdays. Partly, in fact, which is I find quite interesting, their awareness of the lineups. They're more connected with the DJs that have been, or artists that have been playing under 5 years. That's our guidelines for new faces. And maybe they don't connect as much with the programming that we put on. So there is a separation, and it's obviously a smaller number of crowd, but they are still going out, and it's still a very successful, very much loved series. So the young market is there. I definitely think, in general, though, the clubbing age is above 30 for various reasons.
On average. Really?
On average.
Wow.
And maybe
that is significant, like really significantly older than, yeah.
Totally. And there's definitely, this is for Tresor specifically. I think maybe if you look at maybe RSO or another, BCCO is the promoter collective that have a very strong following. They do several parties. Maybe their demographic is, between the 24 to 30-year-old bracket. But another interesting factor that is now playing more and more a part of the conversation is the cost of going out. And if it would make sense that people in their 30s would have maybe, again, assumption, anecdotal evidence that they have more of a disposable income to go out and spend compared with people still at uni or people who are maybe only working part-time, or they're freelance artists, or whatever the various reasons are. It would seem
just earning less when you're in your 20s,
Exactly. So they all fold into a bigger part of the picture here. And I think especially it just helps that the stigma for going out in clubbing in Berlin is not there.
Yeah, I was just shocked really by the persistence of like relatively low prices in clubs. When we did Substance at Berghain, so we finished in, the last one was in 2013 when you moved over, but it was still, I think the highest price, like I think it was less than 15 euros anyway, and was 10 euros, I think, up to 2010 or something. And we were, we were basically paid a fee to do it at night, so we weren't really, on the hook for the financial side of it at all. But it struck me as being completely crazy that you got this thing which is open for 2 days basically, and their attitude was basically just that there was just no elasticity in the audience and the audience perceptions of what prices should be, which maybe that was true at the time.
It's also funny you mentioned that time frame, because I had a friend from Melbourne, Moopy, who played there recently, and he posted a photo of a drinks menu from Panorama Bar from 2012,
right.
And the prices were nothing above €3.
Yeah, right, yeah, exactly. Crazy.
It's and this is a part of the larger conversation that we've been having. Dimitri has been a fervent spokesperson for keeping clubs and club culture accessible to everyone as much as possible. New Faces for us is still only €13. We just finished doing a concert series in summer in Globus called Büro Siebzig. And that was a petri dish of us trying to find a sustainable model for live concerts, club formatting. So basically each Thursday would be a 1 hour, 1.5 hour concert, and then it would fold straight into a club night afterwards. And we kept that at €15. And we really wanted to prove that it's still possible to put on high quality live music and high quality concerts for an affordable price, and allow people to don't have to choose between, okay, there's this midweek event and I really want to go out this weekend. Oh, that's that's already 50, 60, 70 euros to get in. We really wanted to keep that barrier of entry quite low. And it was retrospectively, it worked. It was the feedback for people saying that they can come down and enjoy live music before midnight for an affordable price is still needed and still wanted.
Yeah, that was on my list of things to talk about. We're going to come back to that, so stick a pin in there. It touches upon, though, another issue I had with regards to challenges facing smaller venues, and that's the emergence of advanced ticketing as a standard thing, which is less of a thing in Berlin, I gather. I know that it is less of a thing in Berlin. It's completely standard, though, certainly in the UK, certainly in the States, many other places. And I think this has really done quite a lot of damage to the general culture, the culture of clubbing, generally speaking, in my opinion, is not served well by the culture of selling tickets in advance. Talk a bit about that. What's it like in Berlin? Is my assumption correct? And what do you think about the effect that it would have? Like, what would happen if it did become a thing in Berlin?
It's interesting because we're now in this divide between contemporary promoters and legacy venues. And the contemporary promoters are coming in, maybe not from Berlin, they're coming from across the world and basing themselves here, and they have their, international flavors of business models about clubs. And you can see a very distinct difference between people who, I wouldn't say it's not about understanding Berlin culture, but it's definitely not seeing any borders and saying, well, why can't we do ticketing? It works everywhere else. And then they come in and put on ticket events, and it works. There is a demand for it now. I definitely think the infrastructure that has allowed for more of a frictionless experience with tickets, whether it's to do with rejections and instant refunds, or the basically the streamlining of the service itself, has encouraged promoters to use this pre-sale format. I think for clubs, it was always a part of the experience to not plan where you were going out on a weekend. You always ended up somewhere, and depending on how the atmosphere of the club is renowned for depends on how late you end up there, whether it was Monday morning or Friday evening, and that was, you wouldn't plan for that. You definitely wouldn't book a ticket for Golden Gate Monday morning. That just I mean, you could.
Unless you had a really, really clear idea about what was going to pan out that weekend.
Also true.
Exactly.
You really wanted to guarantee
not many planners kind of Monday mornings, though. Wow.
So yeah, I think I've
got a sick individual would plan that. Jesus.
I have one mate that is
Okay.
that's still a purveyor of Golden Gate. But yeah, I think that definitely is a part of that's a larger conversation and attitude towards tickets. It's interesting to see what, like, we're kind of running a little bit, Berlin is running a little bit behind in terms of that experiment, and whether we would have it, whether the impact of these tickets, like say what happened in London or in Australia, will it have the same impact in Berlin as it continues to go? It's not going to stop. It's not going anywhere. I think.
I mean, you can see why it's attractive, right? Completely see why. I mean, from a
For sure.
financial planning perspective, it's massively superior, just inherently. I do think it's well, I mean, I suppose anecdotally, the reason why I consider it to be, sort of negative is that it puts pressure on, I think, primarily nights which are experimental, nights which are pushing new kinds of music, really are not helped by having to demonstrate in advance that they can be successful, right? I mean, I've told this story, many times. Regular listeners will be well aware of, dubstep starting in Forward in London, and it being sporadically attended in certainly the first 3 years of it. Sometimes good nights, sometimes very empty, and just, I suppose, having a venue owner with a bit of vision and a bit of persistence to enable something to happen, which I think if the figures were, presented on a spreadsheet the day before, the club was going to open, it wouldn't have survived. It just wouldn't have done, So yeah,
totally. And I think that speaks to the business techno kind of cachet of what has been happening to the industry, and just to separate it, it's not just techno that is under this umbrella of an expression. It's a wider part of the slickness of the underground electronic music industry that is now catching up to more like commercials, like large scale, but using their models to make the underground profitable, and that it goes against, it's counterintuitive in a way to the ethos of what underground music is meant for. It's meant for, like you said, it's an experimentation of, like, we're wanting to put this night on and allowing it to grow and allowing it for a reach to happen over time. And I think that folds back into the small venue problem, or lack of having a small venue problem. You're not allowed to grow your concepts. You don't have the time. The amount of people that I saw in give up's not the right word, but they financially couldn't sustain doing a third party in a year. And this is over a 6 month to 9 month period of time. And our rent is was notoriously low for a particular period of time. And it allowed for people to take risks and to understand, okay, I just need to keep at it. And like I said, 3 years, that's a long time in this current climate for people to wait. And, this is a slight tangent, but I think that is a very distinct difference between a lot of the people coming up in the industry, is that they really want instant gratification or instant results for what they're doing. And they're not allowing for the process to take its time. And whether you're a promoter and you want a successful night to happen, if you want to be a good business person, then for sure, then that's you want instant results. But if you're doing this for the craft and you're doing this for the love of your concept and the music and to build a community, that just is going to take time, no matter how you approach it. And yeah, I think that's the big problem with losing these small venues.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's a complicated problem with lots of factors at play in many different directions, which is kind of combining to, I guess, place creative pressure on the dance scene, generally speaking. It's not, great, frankly. Anyway, let's talk about let's talk about what you do as a booker at Tresor. So one of the things, actually, which has come up more than once, is the kind of art of booking a club, right? The programming every week, kind of strategically, building the venue, making sure people come in the door, but also providing a sort of creative direction and a overall musical vibe for the venue. Talk about that a bit. Talk about, so you mentioned you were previously at Ohm. So, was that your first, presumably, experience of doing that as a kind of full-time thing? Correct?
Correct. The Stadtbad was, I helped a little bit, but it was more logistics than actual any curation. There were a few emails sent with some ideas, but that was about it. Ohm was the proper initiation into the idea of programming, and in that sense it was choosing the promoters rather than choosing the actual artists themselves. So each month coming up with a it wouldn't be a creative direction. It was more of a let's not step on each other's toes direction, and making sure that you don't have competing nights stylistically or demographically in the same weekend, or maybe in the same fortnight, sometimes even in the same month. So that really, it was like the perfect training ground for me to be able to understand the Berlin dynamics, the general essence of what programming is. I learned a lot about, temporal structures, how to program weekend, month, over a quarter, and obviously over a year, and allow for flexibility within those structures. And also just coming up with some creative ways to promote the parties themselves, and see how we can support the core elements of what OM stood for. And I kind of tried to transfer that over to when taking that over to Tresor in 2022.
Let me interrupt. What were the biggest challenges or like the biggest lessons from that initial period?
I think, that's a really good question. I would definitely say that, like, trusting your intuition. It's very difficult over time to be reading pitches and proposals, because, and I hope I don't offend anyone or break anyone's hearts, but a lot of them sound the same, and I think it's no fault of the person writing. We're also not, we're not all creative writers, and we're now forced to explain our ideas to someone who doesn't know you, doesn't know the concept, and meanwhile you're ferociously writing this concept at your child, and you finally present it, and it's a very daunting experience for some, and unfortunately on the other end it's met with like a blunt, emotionless, a very objective review, and necessarily. And it's very difficult, because sometimes your intuition's wrong, and you go to a night somewhere else, and you see exactly what was on paper, and you're like, well, I wish I had explained it like this, because that would have that would have helped. So I think that was it was also, that's just a great lesson in you need to be active in terms of really not judging a book by its cover, and making sure that you're experiencing everything, and making sure that you're getting a good context. And I think that was one of the main reasons for me stepping away from OM towards the end. Was I was doing OM and Tresor at the exact same time for 2 years, and it was a lot. It was especially 2022. There was a lot of administrative hangovers from the industry, and also from us. So I really wasn't active in the nightlife, and really wasn't active with the grassroots scene. I very much disconnected from that during the pandemic, and to plug back in and to read people's proposals, and to connect with new people. There was a lot of people that dropped off. It was a challenge, and I said a long time ago that I would stop doing it when I realized that if the quality would drop, or if my understanding of the scene has changed, that I would just be, I'm putting someone's projects in away from them and putting in my hands, and that's a big responsibility for grassroots culture. And I just definitely sensed that I wasn't being able to fulfill that duty. So that's probably the biggest challenge, just having this understanding of what people are trying to communicate, how people are trying to communicate their ideas, and decipher it in the first place, and try and contextualize it. A big part of curation is always contextualizing other people's ideas, and trying to translate what the artist is thinking about, and putting it in a way that is, not everyone has to understand it and get it. But it's a big responsibility to be passing on the artist's concept, and make sure the artist is happy with, okay, my idea is being properly represented. And then it's up to the audience to get it, and that's a separate conversation. But you really need to make sure that the work is properly contextualized.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, were there any notable disasters in your early period? I mean, that was the question I was just came into my head. I mean, that's the bad story is always the most fun to hear. So.
I definitely think that there were periods of time where both the promoter and myself were caught off guard with what the DJ would play.
Okay. Okay.
I think standing more of the surprise of like, wait, standing around the bar at home, going, "Oh, that took an unexpected turn." Shouldn't have booked it for 10 p.m. We should have saved that one for 3 a.m. Or maybe not at all. But there was also there's also been misalignments with industry veterans. I think there's and funny listening to your podcast with Steve Hogan, hearing him talk about some of the more well-established names in the industry wanting to make sure that they stay connected to the to the grassroots and play smaller venues. It's sometimes doesn't always translate, but sometimes there's actually not a demand. And I've seen a couple of times where a very big name couldn't fill on, and they were really happy. There was like the two events that I have in mind. Both artists were extremely lovely, and it was a great night of music, but it wasn't lined down the
not the slam dunk people were expecting, right?
So I think that there's also sometimes a humbling aspect that like is there's a saying in the office which is is the great humbler. And it really, because you do all the venue doesn't do promotion outside of the monthly program. We host the events and put it on the website and whatnot, but it's up to the promoter. So sometimes you can slap an artist name on a bill and expect it to sell tickets, and Berlin is just from experience, it's just not that type of city. It's just it gets drowned out. And really levels the playing field in that sense.
Yeah, right. I mean, we did a few parties. I can't remember the last time we did a party at Om, actually. We used to do hot flush parties there a long time ago now.
Just as I took over, actually.
Oh, really? Okay, was right. I mean, it's a great venue though, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah, it's the perfect size. It's 250 people. The dance floor feels, from the artist perspective, it feels full after 80 people come onto the dance floor, and you can't really see past the first couple of rows, and it creates that energy and atmosphere that you really want in a small venue. It's all contained, one room, very much like a Robert Johnson in that sense.
Yeah, totally. So you took over Tresor 22,
right as just before we were about to open.
I was doing it on hard mode. It must be, because I mean, of course, something happened in the previous couple of years to that.
Yeah, it was.
How long did the club shut for?
For the entire 2 years. Right. But it was quite interesting to see that there was still a sign in. I know I keep talking about Om, but like just when we coming back to the office after the 2 year break, there was a sign in Om on the bar saying, due to the closure, blah blah blah, will be reopened in April 1st, 2020. So that was. We did not reopen during any part of the pandemic. So yeah, there was like many venues across Europe, there was a big hangover and a lot of administrative things that needed to get sorted, and everyone was really confused and fighting their way through this. On top of reopening a venue, we weren't sure how long, if the government was going to once again flip its stance again, and at the end of summer it would shut back down again. There was still that, and that obviously was reflected with bookings, and everything was very last minute. But it came as at a time, as in the news of the former booker leaving. It came as a surprise to him, and it came as a surprise to all of us that he would be transitioning over to a different industry. But for me, it just felt like a natural thing to say, hey, look, we have a 2-month long festival coming up. we also have 2 months worth of programming that we need to get sorted before we open. I'm happy just to help out where possible. And then once the noise dies down from the summer, we can look at finding a proper replacement. They were just very happy to just commit and roll the dice.
Nice.
I think though it also helped that I had been at the club for previously 9 years before, the seven or so years before that. So I understood the legacy. I understood the programming and the approach to what is expected with the curation. I think the biggest challenge there was striking a balance between the legacy and the contemporary climate. 2022 was a very volatile situation, and in terms of people wanting to like the emerging artists of the pandemic and the emerging artists of just getting started from 2019 2018, their careers were cut short, so there was an urgency to kind of make up for that lost time as well. Plus legacy artists from everywhere also wanted to get their careers back online. They had all their tours and everything was like they had a smooth system going, and so there was a lot of just a lot of uncertainty with the conversations that I was having about how the next 6 months was going to unfold. I think I was fortunate that we had this T31 festival, 7-week-long festival that was, it had that gigantic exhibition in the Kraftwerk. They did a 1-for-1 replication of the old Tresor made out of sand, and that was partnered with Usumo, these kind of spatial design headphones where you walk into a certain area and it would activate a sound. So like there was a proper immersive experience in the Kraftwerk. And then to do these activations of festivals and club programming portions was our way of being able to shoehorn in a slightly contemporary direction mixed in with the Tresor legacy. So it was a really nice combination for me to have presented.
So what was it like opening again? Like what was it? I mean, in general terms, there was all sorts of stories across the world, really, of people, these kind of euphoric experiences on the dance floor, people going out for the first time in 2 years, and then that initial period after a few months just sort of dissipating, and there being quite a challenging period actually in the industry. I mean, is that a broad picture of what happened with you guys? Like, what was it like, and what was the early months like, and how does it eventually pan out?
I think it definitely tracks. However, I would say that 2023 was a really strong year for us as well. For Berlin in general, I think there was a big, even more of a relief that we weren't shut down over winter. So that there was still that uncertainty in 6 months. There was still people going out, and yes, there was this jubilation of we're back on track. And all the venues and all the restrictions and everything were lifted. But then there was still this cloud in the air of uncertainty of, is what winter's coming, and are we just going to fall back into this like cycle again? So 2023, I feel, was the proper, cathartic experience of great, we're back on track. There was a little bit more of an alignment with the industry and how we could plan and how we can book a bit further in advance. I still, just from my perspective, I still felt that the industry didn't really align back to its, not necessarily its old rhythm from pre-pandemic, but a better rhythm until 2024. I was also fortunate enough to work as an agent and as a logistics person as well up and like through the pandemic. So there was the insights that were kind of still shared with the agency that I was working for, and it still was a part of, just because it's under the same umbrella. It was 2024 where we really got to plan ahead, get back to all these regular routines. But 2023 definitely was a strong year for Berlin, I think, because of that.
Yeah. So how do you plan the creative direction of Tresor? Generally speaking, that's a big question, but I mean, like, obviously there's the kind of core weekend nights, and there's the other stuff you do. You mentioned the Büro Siebzig series that we'll talk about. like, could you just give a kind of overview of how of the work that you have to do, I suppose, on an ongoing basis to kind of keep ahead on it, and in general, the way it works?
I definitely feel I overcomplicate the process much more than it needs to be.
Okay.
I don't think I need to get into the weeds with all the different like structures and strategies and planning of all these different things. It could be a lot more straightforward from a planning perspective. But at the end of the day, we have the new faces on Wednesdays. Our club knocks are, I would say, the majority, about 70% of our Saturdays. And then Fridays are based around our collaborations, like labels. We have a very large resident pool, both locals and through label affiliates, EU-based, that help with co-curations. And we have some other in-house bookings that maybe not reflect the Club Nacht general creative direction with that. So generally it's Detroit Techno, house upstairs, Detroit Techno in Tresor, house upstairs, or generally traditional classic 4/4 techno downstairs.
Okay, so let me ask you about the subgenres and the granularity of techno. Like, who is it? You who basically moves the pieces around the board here in terms of like what kind of techno gets booked? I mean, you mentioned you sound a little bit skeptical about hard techno, which I can understand. But how does this work within the organization? Like, because there must be also conflicting voices that people you work with, that kind of thing. Talk about that a little bit.
It's difficult when there's when obviously just rating music or reviewing music, the subjectivity is just off the charts in terms of how people perceive like how a bass night might be perceived in Globus. It has a fat sound system, and it should have one night a month where that gets properly tested. It's amazing. We did Exit Records at the start of August, and
nice.
I know Darren put that system to work, and it's healthy to have these sounds in Globus put forth. But with Tresor, I don't get too granular. I just make sure that the lineups are structured in a way that makes sense. It doesn't have to be. I do enjoy the nuances with maybe putting someone with hard groove in with maybe more of a Detroit flavor in, or just doing these little combinations. I try not to. I think that was a big problem in 2022 in general, was and I know there's conversations across the forums and across the podcast sphere is a bit tired and fatigued from this, but like the ability to warm up and the ability to open the whole substrate about the boiler room radio on 1 hour of power problem that
as far as I'm concerned, this is a point which should continue to be made, but carry on.
Also true. I mean, I feel it's gotten a little bit better, but again, it's difficult for me to speak on a broader sense, because Tresor as an institution and as a legacy venue as it still is underground in the way that is incomparable to other venues that have the capacity and filling the capacity is what I usually think of, rather than like brand power, like globally a recognition. And yeah, I think I don't have that much of a problem as much as I did. I think that's also because there's this beautiful influx of DJs that have now is 5-6 years into their craft, and they take it seriously now. They commit to it. They learn. They have. I'm loving the mentorship dynamic that is happening with a lot of established artists that are either putting records out of new people on their labels. They're doing back-to-backs with someone. They're putting on nights. They're giving them the spotlight, and that's giving them that very valuable experience to make sure that they understand that different times of the club night really do matter, and what you play really does matter to the next DJ. So I'm a little bit optimistic about that, and how from the experience of what we hear at Tresor is it's not as big of a problem as it used to be. But that also comes down to the work that I do with artists and with agents, we have a lot more time to talk with them about the lineups themselves. Not everything, not every night, but definitely when we do the co-curation, the Tresor meets X, that is a wish list of artists that gets sent, and we discuss, okay, the timetable. The artist feels comfortable, the headline artist feels comfortable knowing that the people playing before them will be playing something that they're comfortable with transitioning over to. Or in some cases, they actually like to do the warm-up, the 4-hour warm-up, and give the opportunity to the emerging talents and the next generation, and give them the main slot. It could also be that they just want to finish up at 3 a.m. instead of 7 a.m. and get a better night's sleep. Don't blame them for that either. But yeah, so there's many different ways in terms of how I kind of program the specifics and ins and outs. But with the genres, I just kind of bracket them in a way that makes sense and it's not too abrasive of a transition, because I do feel that I'm just a very linear person, and I like order, I like progression, I like to build something. It does. I do have these very interesting conversations with the Atonal crew when I've had the absolute pleasure of helping with the club curation side of things for the past 2 years, and going back and forth with them about my linearity. Oh, that's a hard word to pronounce.
Linearity.
And their controlled chaos and their approach to let's really test the contrasting. Let's really see how this works alongside one another. And but just from a day-to-day thing, I really don't have the capacity or the resources to be pondering about contrast for every single lineup. So putting it into a nice template for me to understand, and it helps, I think, having these conversations with artists as well. So it's a mixture of everything.
So there are no external promoters at all, correct?
We have to hire the venue only until recently. We've had a collective who started out at I believe, called Multisex, and they take over Globus, and they're as external as you can get in terms of the structure of venue hire, and then they come in and do their thing. Everything else is a collaboration and booked in-house. And yeah, that's we have a loose structure of exactly how we plan over each quarter, with there's not an end goal. It's we're open 52 weeks of the year. We don't have seasons per se.
It's a marathon, not a sprint, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we do, and then pretty much around this time now, we start doing the review process, looking back at this year, and then start talking with agents, start talking with artists, see what they have planned for next year. Really want to hone in on, improving the relationships and improving the artists' ideas, and seeing what we can have fun with. Again, I'm just in a very fortunate position with how the club is, that we can focus on the conceptual, we can focus on the maintaining the philosophy of the club, rather than worry about getting a certain numbers. Obviously are important. I wouldn't be saying that they're not, and we have to be concerned with certain things, but majority of the time when it comes to the direction, we don't have to worry so much, because the Berlin landscape is just so erratic in terms of the results. A big name does not necessarily mean a full house, and just as much as a very small collective of local DJs could be doing really, really well on any given weekend. So it's a combination, but yeah, very, very hard not to trying not to let that noise kind of get into the actual creative process.
Yeah, sure. Really interesting. Back to a general question about this kind of stuff, but relating to the small venue thing we were talking about earlier. How important is it, do you think, for a kind of a club venue that's putting on these kinds of nights to have a specific creative direction which is led in the way that you lead the direction for Tresor? How important is it, do you reckon, for the success of a venue like that?
100% important. I think it's integral. It gets at the why you're doing this. I think with especially in a saturated market, especially considering the attention economy or whatever kind of substrate of the problems with TikTok and Instagram, with anyone not having any more of an understanding of a depth of concept, and just quickly scrolling through, not even reading a caption. Having that integral backbone of a creative identity is fundamental, because then people don't have to think. It's people have that sound and people in their mind, or they have the artist in their mind, and they don't have to question anything. They can just go straight in and go, okay, I can expect this. It's still important to challenge people and have the conversation where people are thinking about where they're going and whatnot. But fundamentally, you need the why, and you need that purpose for people to come down. And also, I think in Tresor's specific case, it's history. We have to constantly communicate the history of the club and its relationship with Detroit. It's we saw. Yeah,
I mean, so this let me just interrupt, because this is a question I specifically had down to ask you. So great that you're addressing it already. Yeah, so the legacy of Tresor, I mean, it must sit pretty heavily in the background to everything you guys do, right? Because I mean, it's the original Berlin club, essentially. I mean, it certainly has that kind of reputation anyway. And as you said, the relationship with the Detroit guys, the legacy of the techno as a genre, it's the most important club in the history of techno, probably. And I said it. I said it.
I appreciate that.
No, I think it's a reasonable. Yeah, you can certainly make the case anyway. What's it like having that sitting there in the background? How much of a thing is it that you consider in a conscious way with your day-to-day decisions, I suppose? And then what's it there? Like I said, what's it like just being there, per se?
It's possibly one of the best challenges to have from a curatorial perspective. It is you're dealing with legacy, and you're dealing with history, and you're dealing with how to communicate that to a big demographic of people who don't know, maybe don't care, or haven't. It's not in their frame of mind when they're thinking about going out. So yeah, the weight is always looming there. The conversation, we're basically trying to find ways outside of just the booking program to always communicate that history, whether it's through the label, whether it's through our podcast series, any form of editorial that we can find over the years that we just place in the centerpiece of the Tresor story. It's central to that. And when it comes to the booking specifically, it is increasingly, or it was increasingly difficult due to the rising cost of just traveling from America. That was just, it was almost impossible. The logistics of having artists from Detroit come over was just not there. It's getting much better. This year has been a much more fruitful year. Even this weekend, we have a Blueprint 313 collective. It's a Flinter collective that coming over to Berlin for the first time, as a collective, and they're putting on night. And the following week, we have Max Watts coming over, and who's being championed as a very, very poster boy for the next gen Detroit sound. I don't want to put too much weight on his shoulders, but there's also Huey Mnemonic, D-Strain's not from Detroit, but there's this very exciting bubbling up of the follow. Detroit loves to talk about generations, and so this is the next generation in that sense that we're very excited to be able to support, and now have the context to support, because only 1 or 2 years ago it really wasn't possible to take that risk. And with everyone's perspective kind of now being focused on the programming, and less about the noise around, about the reopening or anything like that, we can get back to actually telling the story of Tresor. And then slowly trying to pair that with the legacy artists that maybe people have either never heard of or, would like to revisit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So yeah, let's talk about a couple of things here to finish up. The Büro Siebzig series, the live series. I was listening to your podcast with Chloe Lula earlier where you talk about it. It's an interesting thing to do, actually. Very interesting approach. I mean, because obviously live and electronic is, historically two things which have sat together slightly uncomfortably. So, I mean, you mentioned before keeping the ticket price low, but talk a little bit about the series, how it went, what were the key nights, etc.
I mean, basically, it was a culmination of a couple of years in the making because Globus went through a massive renovation. The floor itself completely transformed during the pandemic, and now not just with the system, but also with the staging and the bar and everything. So it's almost like a bigger sibling of Om now in terms of its infrastructure and the architecture of the space. And we have this great stage. It is ripe for this type of format. Second to that was my own personal romanticism with creating a community hub for people to come down and just enjoy music. I've always been fascinated with these cultural hotspots or art hubs for people just to hang out at, and there's a cross-pollination of ideas and exchange from everyone's different backgrounds. Creates something special, creates a new subculture, etc. And I thought this was a great idea to kind of, one, do that, but also reconnect with what already happened, which was the Fish Bureau, Dimitri's and a few other people. They founded a Dadaist club, or basically it was it's the art space hangout for the local art collectives of the time. And I took a lot of inspiration from that. I think that I really wanted to get back to the idea that, there can be a band, playing some psychedelic Turkish folk rock, and then have a club night afterwards. I can bring those two worlds together and see what happens. And I really wanted to use this 7 weeks as a test for what genres do work on stage, what they look like. I think that was also taking the theoretical into the practical. How do these genres sound on stage, and how does the crowd respond? Is there a demand for it? Do people want midweek live concerts that, like, am I trying to push two sides of the Venn diagram too close together and force this to happen, force these worlds to happen? Because of my perception about, okay, if people are blurring art and performance art into a club night, maybe I can do the same with concerts. And it was interesting to see how that played out. And keeping it at €15 was obviously was imperative to the whole concept.
So was there a key, or was there a particularly memorable moment throughout the series, or moments?
I think the Mannequin Records night was where it all clicked for everyone. I think that was where it was. I think it was week 3 or 4. We had 2 bands on stage. We had Silver Tears, which was a new project, and Cozy Muller, and they were in the cold wave, post-punk kind of. I'm going to get crucified for mispronouncing these genres. Okay. But it was in that vein, and I just had this moment of enjoying the concert for what I had in my mind, like aesthetically, like this is what the stage was meant to be. This is what the stage was meant to host. How the crowd was responding, how it sounded in general. I just really thought it clicked that night. And then the final night, which was really nice, we had Dunya, who's a neo soul singer, perform with D Monk, who was on production, and opening the night was Henry Weeks, who performed this beautiful ambient saxophone solo with some field recordings and things like that. And the crowd just sat down and listened to it and enjoyed and absorbed Henry's performance. And that was the first time out of the whole, like it was the last one, but no one sat down and enjoyed and just listened. And I think that for me was a real testament to the concept being, understood, which was great.
Nice. Yeah, awesome. I mean, I really like it as a general approach. Yeah, I mean, are there plans to do more of that kind of thing?
Totally. I think we aim to do more concerts in Globus in general. We have a Downwards Records night coming up that has like 3 or 4 live acts, both upstairs and downstairs. And we have Indaga Rhythm Force, which will be in November. But they're all kind of sporadic little concerts that will kind of patter throughout the rest of the year. As far as Büro Siebzig as a concert series, that will definitely reactivate in summer over the Thursdays. I think that's just I don't want to bite off more than I can chew and start getting into the band world and start programming weekly band concerts. I think that's
that's a can of worms.
But yeah, I think from the feedback from everyone and from both internally and from the public, it was well received. The model is there now for us to look at and work on and refine. But yeah, I'm really happy with it. I'm glad I had the opportunity to do that. It was a great challenge.
Nice. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Paul. Just before you go, you mentioned that you used to work in gastronomy. Tell me a bit about that. I'm a bit of a hobbyist in this area, kind of. I like eating in posh restaurants, but I mean, that's probably as far as it goes. What did you used to do in gastronomy? And you mentioned you did some at Statbat as well, didn't you? Go on. Tell me.
Yes, I mean, in basically, uni was not my strong point after trying to become a avid screenwriter and then switch
really?
over.
Wow. Okay.
Then switch over to psychology and dietetics. I also just didn't fit. So, but it didn't fit because I also discovered bartending whilst at uni. So. Not a good combination when you first start learning how to make cocktails and you have a lecture at 8 a.m. So I decided to move to Melbourne for gastronomy. I worked in a number of cocktail bars, basically going around asking for tutelage, and landed a job.
Oh, so were you a mixologist? Is that the technical term?
Oh, I would. I hate to admit, but yeah, I had the beard, I had the vest, I had the taxi driver hat.
Awesome.
It was there. There's evidence.
Nice.
So basically working in fine dining, and yeah, but I worked in hotels. I worked in like kind of 3-star restaurants. Worked in cocktail bars. Try to get as much experience across all industries as possible. Then was about to open a bar with a friend, and he's like, before we do that, let's go to Berlin. And he already been there. He had already visited 2 years before that. So he twisted my arm to take a break before we opened a venue. And yeah, now it's 13 years later. He's opened the bar, by the way.
Okay.
But yeah, I just, when I started at Statbat, it was trying to initially take over some of the. There was like a shop bar around the corner of the bunker floor. So I was helping kind of create some cocktails there, and I was also a runner. So when Statbat closed, we just moved over, and I started working as a runner bar back at Tresor when the initial shift happened.
Right. So what's your cocktail of choice?
Now, easily probably something like a Manhattan or Manhattan or an old-fashioned Negroni.
Whiskey cocktails guy, are you? Okay.
Yes, just something. Well, now I'm a bit more withered in my stamina for drinking more than 1 or 2 cocktails, but I may as well make it count.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Paul, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. Really appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. It was a pleasure to chat.
not diving with Scuba.